Donc, on va faire deux choses très différentes, deux formats très différents. On va commencer par un format ultra décontracté et passer sur un format hyper stressant. Donc, théoriquement, on préférait l'inverse, mais matériellement, on n'a pas pu. Voilà. Donc, le premier format hyper décontracté, c'est tout simplement parce que Julieta et Armen, qui se connaissent bien, qui sont amis, qui vivent pas très loin l'un de l'autre, ont privilégié un format de conversation ce soir, donc pendant environ 45 minutes jusqu'à 6h15, et conversation qui sera largement ouverte au public. Et si les dieux de la technologie nous entendent et nous bénissent, à 6h15, on aura miraculeusement Eyal Weitzman qui s'affichera sur cet écran et qui commentera un PowerPoint. On a quand même tenu à maintenir cette session avec Eyal, parce que je ne sais pas si vous connaissez le travail de Forensic Architecture, mais c'est vraiment un travail capital pour le monde contemporain, et vous le comprendrez si le PowerPoint marche. Voilà, merci à vous.
Thanks, Lionel.
Pardon, la session est en anglais, donc pour ceux qui ont besoin de casque, il y a de la traduction simultanée, mais je dis aussi que Francesco parlera en français, donc ceux qui ne parlent pas anglais. For those who are not speaking in French, the second session at 6:15 will have 5 minutes or so in French as well. Thanks.
Thanks again, Lionel. This morning when I woke up, the world was still fine. I didn't know that I'm going to have the honor and actually the pleasure of chairing this panel. Meanwhile, the program or the plan changed so many times that if I'm totally confused and I start talking to people that are not here, do apologize. But I know it's my good friend Julieta, luckily, who's here, who I'll just briefly introduce. There are so many Julietas. There's at least 4. Julietas. There's the artist Julieta Aranda, who I won't bother you if you have a look in the program, all the solo shows and the various biennials on various continents she was in. There's the political thinker and theoretician in her own right. Thirdly, I would say there's the e-flux Julieta Aranda, that is running with 2 other people, which is a very, I even mentioned that in my talk yesterday, I think it's a paradigmatic platform for a bit what this conference is about, namely the encounter between art and theory. It's really a paradigmatic way of thinking and doing this encounter. And there's the activist, I would say, the political activist, like just from the last year, you did with some others this refugee translation book. And when we last emailed a few days ago, Julieta started organizing an encounter that maybe we can talk about it. I couldn't attend because I was here in Berlin, a gathering of 20 people that turned out to be 120 people discussing, strategizing and so on about what to do next after the election. So these are just 4 of the many others, Julieta Arandas. I just want to read this because it's actually, it will show you why she's the perfect person here for this beginning of the last evening session. The description a bit of her work and her general interest in the booklet. Central to Aranda's practice are her involvement with circulation mechanisms and the idea of a poetics of circulation, her interest on science fiction, space travels and zones of friction, the possibility of a politicized subjectivity through the perception and use of time, and the notion of power over the imaginary. So you see that some of the topics that we've been discussing during the conference, the theory and the practice thing, the now, the past, and the future, but also questions of affectivity and rationality. And that's a bit the horizon that I want to open up and bring into the discussion and ask you about. And maybe I really start with the first one, mixing these different topics. We talked a lot about time and the contemporary and about this frightening situation. Now, how do we think that together? Is there something like a temporality of fear or that?
That's, temporality of fear, that's something, it was very funny because of course I received the invitation to be here in what I consider a different world. Yes, so I was preparing a presentation that involved talking about very abstract temporalities as they relate to my work. And then since last week is like the moment when you wake up in the wrong side of the bed and you realize that you will always be waking up in the wrong side from now into the foreseeable future. And then whatever it is that I had to say felt kind of like grossly out of place somehow. Like there were like I kind of like needed to shift gears and figure out how to, like, if I am going to talk about time, which has always been a big interest for me, just in terms of thinking of measuring instruments, the human, like issues of human scale, and historicization of bodies and ideas and so on. The one thing that came into mind as of last week, I don't know how many of you woke up the way I woke up, but I cried for 3 days, and there is the moment when you are, you know, like sitting on your living room and something takes you over the brink. In my case, it was permafrost and corals, and like the one thing that at some point cracked me was that all the Great Barrier Reef was dying, and it had to do with Trump. And then just I sat in complete desolation, being crying over corals and thinking about a certain temporality again of the biggest living organism on Earth that was dying, and being very afraid for it somehow, and feeling very disempowered. So I kept thinking, okay, so what kind of energy is there in fear? And I mean, I really have no answer, because this is something that just came into my mind last week, and I was mentioning it to you just earlier today. But what can, you know, like trying to examine how does fear manifest, when has it manifested, and what does one do with it other than lamenting? And I mean, like, I don't know, like I think I'm still lamenting, so trying to, but I think that it's important to contextualize it and to think that, okay, at this moment it feels, I mean, like maybe something that, because fear awakens fight or flight reactions, if there is one thing that it makes me feel very acutely is that I'm living in the present, yeah? Like you are not afraid in the past, then you can be afraid for the future, but you're afraid now. So in that sense, I would say that if there is a temporality to fear, is the present tense.
I mean, you know, as a philosopher, the first thing, if you hear about fear, you know, there's this distinction between fear and angst. So angst is the one that has like no specific locality, no object, and maybe no clear temporality. I don't know. So yeah, but this is not angst; it's fear. Yeah. So according to you, it has a certain temporality, and it has a certain. Yeah, does it also have a certain addressee, or is that part of the morning work and the attempt to orientate ourselves, or find a new orientation? Isn't it to find a new frontier, or to find a new not enemy, but find new lines of orientation of how to act and how to think?
You know, it's like the thing is that it brings you back to certain basics that that one had hoped to be able to act past, yeah? Like all of a sudden I wake up and I have to not just, I mean, like in terms of an addressee, and you mean like being afraid of something, or being...
No, fear. I mean, you talked about the energy in fear. So there's a positive element compared to a kind of angst that doesn't know where it comes from and how to direct. So fear seems to be giving us a first orientation, something like a tactical orientation.
I mean, like tactical regrouping. I mean, like that. It's something that you know, bodies become less abstract. Yeah, like there is the moment where if you are Mexican woman, you are all, like, as is my case, you are all of a sudden a brown body, and then it becomes an unescapable reality, like something that I didn't give too much thought. All of a sudden is there, yeah. Like it's not abstract. I have to actually think from that position and speak on behalf of myself, because I mean, like my, I mean, like, it's not so as not to be spoken on behalf of, if that makes any sense.
I mean, maybe I keep that for later, but I do have this general and abstract question about like theory and practice, like really your artistic practice and your thinking. But just from your first statement, I mean, you started a bit with the kind of, and I'm sure many of us experience the same thing, this kind of highly emotional reaction, and then you stressed several times that the thinking process. So I'm really interested in like how do these two relate, or how should they relate, or should they relate in a different way? Because, as I said in my short intro, we talked a lot about, and there were very different opinions about. Some people said we should abandon rationality, and then I think Kader said at one point we have to win over the terrain, the whole field of affectivity. So when I was listening to you, I thought like, so what do we do in this situation that some describe as irrational? I'm not sure it's not irrational, because I think everything can be somewhat explained. It's more, I think, before when we talked, it's more an illogical situation. So how do we deal with our affects in order not to become irrational, but like somehow make sense of it and act in a different way?
I mean, like, this is one of the things that I have been thinking over the last week is how illogical this past week is, how and that in the same way that there is power to fear, there is power to this lack of logic, and that we as thinking left, let's say, we are extremely bound to reason, and we can reason our way out of almost everything, except that this is a situation that's so unsticky, like the opposite of sticky, however you say that. There must be a word that means unsticky.
It's what's that? If you what? Not slippery.
It's like like slippery would do, yeah. Like, but it's something that it doesn't matter how much logic, how much reason we throw towards the current situation. It doesn't stick because of the high degree of its lack of logic. So, how does one go about understanding that at this moment reason doesn't do and logic doesn't do, and one may need to develop slightly more illogical tools and slightly more illogical ways to relate to a world that is kind of like upside down, because putting it down and just like saying this fantastically horrendous other that is in front of me is illogical, and it's a brute and it's a barbarian and it's an idiot, and these kind of barriers make communication completely impossible. So I wouldn't even know how to go about it. It just feels that it's something that I need to start engaging on.
So the way I understand you, there is a danger of us, now I say we, us, the left or so, those that are shocked by the events, that we fall into the same trap of producing an other yet again, because our other, the kind of racist, suprematist, whatever, electorate, or it's not even a majority, the way they act is this illogical production of another. The Mexican. We have produced. But do we do the same?
We have done it for a long time. I mean, like the othering of that we have done is been. And that's what I was a little bit talking about in terms of abstract bodies that all of a sudden become very concrete. Of course, we have been speaking on behalf of forces and abstractions and ideas, be it students, be it workers, be it the proletariat, be it jellyfish. There's some kind of abstraction, and both abstraction and arrogance in disclaiming both the ability and the moral position to be able to speak on behalf of this other character that one doesn't fully understand. It's also, it also constitutes. So speaking on behalf of something or someone is not giving them voice. It's actually taking their voice. So, I think that with the best of intentions, over the last 30 or 40 years, the left has done quite a bit of othering in its.
But I don't know about the jellyfish, but the problem is, we should not talk on behalf of the other, but this is like not nice for me, but like I'm hoping you have an answer. You probably won't, because it's a very tricky one. But like, how do we get in communication with the other when the other is obviously illogical and the way you describe it, like
slippery. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, like the only thing that gets into my mind, and this is, I'm being slightly how do you say, not nonsensical, because this is all fresh thought that has not been worked up. But the one thing that comes clear is that you know, as part of the many updates that thinking needs in a regular basis, this is something about developing other forms, things that are more illogical. I think that we have also gotten quite comfortable with the way in which we manifest politics and the circles within which circulate our politics, right? That's it's again quite abstract. So maybe I'm calling from some illogical solidification of affect, in a sense, as to the how do you go about doing this. I mean, A, I don't know, because this is fairly new, and B, I don't think that there is a blanket way of doing it. That it's probably something that varies. You know, one of the problems that we have is the gross simplification, to say that you know, like I mean, like in creating others, one tends to make them by simplifying them. So I think to come up with like a single master plan solution is, again, simplifying. How do we go about talking to this abhorrent character that shifted, you know, world politics into darkness? I don't know. I mean, like you know, it's very hard to think that one wants to talk to them when you read this statement that came out yesterday or today about darkness. I don't know if any of you saw it. That this guy Bannon, who is now the strategy advisor of Donald Trump, was saying darkness is good. Darth Vader, Satan, that's power. And it becomes really difficult. Like when that's political speech, it's almost poetry, yeah. But I mean, like as poetry, I could like it. As political speech is frightening. And it comes from a place of affect as well, yeah. Like there is passion to this. So I think one also has to address these issues with a similar energy. I mean, like, what are you going to do? Go tell people, you know, Darth Vader is bad, Satan is bad, darkness is bad. Like, I don't know if one can really enter that kind of conversation.
But how do we tap into this kind of, like, I would say, dark continent? This not irrational, but like totally illogical, like thinking of racists and so on. Like, how do we tap into both in the sense of making sense of it for ourselves in order to understand even whom we to communicate, but also whom to address, actually, you know? It's not so clear, because you hinted at it a bit. There's a certain detachment. So together with this kind of producing of the other goes a kind of reclusion or a growing distance between one and the other.
I mean, like, and I think, and maybe this is where fear comes into play. Yeah? Like, I think before thinking about addressing these others, it's a matter of addressing ourselves and addressing our own fears, and trying to understand where, you know, what it is that one, because I think that in the same way that one cannot make simplifications, fear comes in many different manifestations in a situation like this. It's deeply personal. And you know, like, then of course there is this whole thing that I assume everybody has been doing, of like, yes, we have been living in a bubble, we are like mea culpas, plenty of mea culpas all around, and a lot of catharsis and emotional moments. But you know, like, then when there is this kind of emotion and this kind of, I mean, like, I think that's like the one thing that, beyond like the reason that we try to make of the situation, of course, we have like now this figure has emerged, yeah, like the disenfranchised, the forgotten middleman, which is like the forgotten white man, basically. And then all of a sudden we have an additional political character in our narrative of identity politics, yeah? Like, so, I mean, like, how I mean, it's like you have one extra figure in the chess table, yeah, like next to the tower, there's all of a sudden another thing, and you have to figure out how it moves, you know, like you know that the horse goes to here, one here, you know that the bishop moves in diagonals, and this new, you know, like figure in the chess table, I don't yet know how it moves. What are the you know, how did you block it in the opposite side? I mean, I think a lot about that just because of finding out in the course of having a political meeting last week, finding out that Breitbart is opening, which is this like horrendous news organization in the US, is opening offices in London, Paris, and Berlin, and then. Just like trying to figure out, okay, then how does, I mean, like that's actually something that's quite tangible. One has to do something about. Yeah? Like I want to write papers and I want to put another 70 issues of e-flux journal out, but I don't think that I'm going to be able to stop Breitbart by way of e-flux journal. Yeah, like that's.
But what would be the platforms, or because another thing we talked a lot about, or I mean, somehow I'm in a better mood after. I'm exhausted, but I'm in a better mood after 4 days here in the colony. So one thing we've been discussing is like what kind of institutions, what kind of places do we need, or what kind of platforms. So we shouldn't abandon the platforms we have, but maybe we can like reprogram them or build other ones and reinforce the institutions we have. So isn't it also about places, institutions, localities that open up a kind of different porosity and exchange of people and also it's such a used word, but like enables an encounter of otherness instead of like this is the art world bubble and this is the kind of racist bubble and this is the, you know, that this non-communicating like platform. So how do we, maybe that's a direction to move towards, like building platforms that are not so clean and not so smooth in themselves, that are themselves slippery.
I mean, it's like yes, that's one of the points that I would go towards. But it's also something about, I mean, like trying to think about these platforms to be not as like the way in which we normally build platforms are to harness power, and they tend to be fairly self-serving. Yeah, so how within the worlds that we inhabit, which are fiercely competitive and not particularly nice, yeah, how do we go about creating an institution that harnesses power towards non-self-serving goals? That's, I mean, like that's a catch-22 a bit. Like thinking about both the theory, the academic, and the artistic world is, it's not a nice. We are not the nicest people.
Not really, no. We are nice, but of course we're the exception. No.
I mean, you know, something that it's also, again, something that has, I'm really sorry I can be a lot more structured. These are really just loose thoughts. Something that came in conversation a couple of days ago was the idea of the hinterland. Yeah? We keep talking about institutions and fairly urban, contained, collected, like dense, very, very dense situations. And a lot of these cast of forgotten situations and characters are take place in the hinterland, which is where resources are located. Yeah, which I mean, like we are trying to solve things from the place where there is the largest accumulation of cognitive capital, and I think the other to be addressed is not here. Is actually located in a different environment. So yeah. I'm not so sure that if the, I mean, that's what like the idea both in the metaphorical and in a real sense, you know, like this hinterland, where is it located? Not just like the obvious answer of like, yes, that's the rural Middle America, or that's in the, I mean, like there is a
But that really touches upon the core of our somehow liberal understanding of what like politics is, or democracy. Like the polis is always an urban space. And I mean, every election that somehow goes wrong, we see a kind of split that the cities, I mean, like for me as an Austrian, it's like Vienna is fine, right? But the problem is the countryside, yeah? So how do we deal with this split? And doesn't that mean that we need another concept of the polis, of democracy?
I mean, like, one of the things is that, like, the polis as it is constituted, of course, it lives on the back of the hinterland. Yeah, like, I mean, like, I think about it just in terms of, I don't know, Mexico. Yeah, like, yeah, you have a fantastic capital city at the expense of the rest of the country, for example. Yeah, and there is, like, of course, unrest and drug wars and decapitations galore, and, you know, like, travel at your own risk because you may be beheaded if you turn right in the wrong place, and don't buy honey because the people that, like, selling honey in the middle of the road means that you are waiting for a delivery of cocaine, and so on. Yeah, like, so, and of course it's very easy to say, well, that's over there, but I mean, like, this kind of split, yeah, like, that's, I mean, like, you know, like, trying to solve it by creating the same kind of institutions that got us here. I mean, like, I don't.
No. I mean, it's like totally fair enough, but we don't have answers, but we shouldn't also indulge in this kind of ethics of failure and just the process is interesting. The question is how do we really formulate goals? I was thinking, so who are the people that we could bring in for exactly these questions? Of one person comes to mind that I've been visiting recently several times is Koolhaas. He thinks a lot about the countryside.
Of course, yeah,
right?
I've been talking about him lately. Yeah.
Maybe we can even bring it into the next discussion with Eyal afterwards.
Yeah.
But I just as a host, I was told, and I want to open a bit the floor because we have only 15 minutes actually, so that there's some questions also from you, from the audience, to Julieta. But I didn't want to interrupt you if you wanted to answer.
I had a thought that then went away. It'll come back.
It'll come back. So.
Either in French or in English, and I bring headphones.
Okay.
Soit en français, soit en anglais, comme vous voulez. Oui.
Bon, excusez-moi si je vais utiliser un ton un peu dur, mais vu que la situation est un peu dramatique, je me le permets sans vouloir, disons, m'adresser directement à vous. Mais je parle avec vous en ce moment, mais mon discours, ça va être plus général. Je n'ai pas compassion pour vous. Aucune. Et je n'ai pas peur, comme vous. Parce que ça que vous êtes en train de vivre, c'est rien. Vous avez dit que vous êtes levé du mauvais côté du lit. Vous n'avez pas encore regardé sous le lit, qu'est-ce qu'il y a. Mais, pendant des années, les institutions, soi-disant de gauche, culturels, les artistes qui, disons, s'activaient pour changer le monde, ils ont caché sous le tapis la poussière qui puait. Ils ont détruit tous les instruments de pensée qu'on avait à disposition. Et maintenant, on se réveille et dit, tiens, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé à Detroit? Une ville fantôme. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé depuis 10 ans dans lesquels on a chassé les gens de leur maison? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé avec les subprimes? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé avec la législation de Clinton-Marie dans les années 95-96 à propos de la finance? Tout a une logique. Mais pendant ces jours, je n'ai jamais entendu parler de Gramsci, je n'ai jamais entendu parler de Godel, je n'ai jamais entendu parler de Tarski. Et ça revient les mêmes sources qui ont participé à construire ce type de réalité sur lesquelles on se fonde pour chercher à sortir de cette situation auquel beaucoup d'intellectuels ont contribué avec leur aveuglement ou alors avec autre chose que je ne veux pas psychologiser. La situation, ce n'est pas à psychologiser. La situation...
Can you come to your question? Maybe.
La question, c'est qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ce que je vous dis?
Okay, so what do how does one answer this? I mean, like, I think, I mean, like, one of the things is that, like, the polis as it is constituted, it's of course it lives on the back of the hinterland. Yeah, like, I mean, like, I think about it just in terms of, I don't know, Mexico. Yeah, like, I mean, like, I Yeah, very, I mean, like, very terrible. I'm sorry, I need to take this because I'm listening to somebody translating me, and that doesn't work. How, I mean, yeah, it's, well, I understand that you are quite upset. I'm not entirely sure of how can I phrase that into a question. So, you have no sympathy for me because something happened in Detroit. What happened in Detroit? What happened with during the Clinton era? Gramsci. So it's very hard to make sense of it. You know, like the one thing, trying to take onto what you're saying, it's interesting to try to understand from where does one address a problem. Yeah, like does it have a place being discussed by me as an artist, or by me as a political activist, or by me as a theoretician, if I can call myself that, and trying to find, first of all, what is the right place to discuss and to make a dent into things. Yeah, I cannot claim or accept responsibility for a lot of the terrible things that you mentioned, for example. Yeah, like at a personal level, but what I can say is that there are places in which an artwork can be used as a gesture, or where an artwork can lose all its efficiency as a response. Just, I'm not making any sense, but that question was complicated. Or
But maybe just because of the, I like polemics and aggressiveness, but thinking about not the content of the question, but the way the question was put to you, I thought maybe instead of following my first instinct, arguing for 10 minutes against Gramsci and the idea of an organic intellectual and whether that still makes sense in the age of algorithms and so on, maybe we, on the left, we should stop like following our first instinct, which is like smashing our own heads, right? If someone wants to go in the direction of the organic intellectual or proceed with Gramsci, well, let him contribute. If someone has ideas about the hinterland, an architect, let him contribute. So we should rather like work together, you know, like
well,
this.
But that's not the splinter left is a specialty of the left, no?
It is.
Yeah,
no?
I mean, I don't think that's what I was trying to tell you before. It's like I don't think there are blanket solutions to this. I don't think the problem is created by one single city. That it's not something. It's not like a virus that started in Detroit and that spread throughout the rest of the world. It's not that the financial crisis and the subprime mortgages.
Isn't Detroit the city that has the least Trump votes? It's only like 3% or something. So I think Stephen Shaviro posted that on Twitter. He was very proud. So they have only 3%. But I agree with you that one cannot like single out, like there's no single
I mean, like
reason.
to spend too much time trying to figure out where our mistakes are. There are plenty. I mean, it's maybe possible. What's possible for me to do is to focus in the things where I feel that I can have make a dent. Yeah, like to spend. I mean, like there's going to be plenty of apologies of our mistakes for the next couple of years, I imagine. So I personally prefer not to be one of the people that does that. I think that if fear is like the one feeling I'm trying to get used to, I'm not somebody that's very fearful. So being afraid, it's a fairly new thing. And this point of living in very much in the present right now makes me think, okay, then should not forget the future, right? Like, how does one imagine a future at this moment with the tools that we have? Okay, can these tools construct a future in any particular way? Maybe not. Maybe we need new tools. So how do we go about it? I mean, like that's.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, but I don't want to take over. But the future thing is the important one, because what we're confronted with is people that actually want to go back to the past, and that's like, I mean, that's not even. You don't need a deconstruction of what they say. That's just obvious. But it's somehow we shouldn't talk about our fault. But like we have difficulties like really formulating a future that is going beyond the fact that time is still clicking. You know, time is still passing. I guess we have time for one or two more questions.
Yeah. Three, maybe.
Three.
Ouais.
En français, pardon, je vais essayer. C'est juste pris en sandwich entre votre propos et ce que disait monsieur derrière moi, et que j'entends aussi, j'entends les deux. Et j'ai entendu dans ce que vous disiez, peut-être sur une espèce de... Non pas pour se flageller, comme disait Armen, mais une sorte d'inventaire des erreurs. J'ai entendu, je crois avoir entendu dans ce que vous disiez, qu'était cette prétention à représenter l'autre. Du côté de l'art contemporain, notamment, ça a été quelque chose d'assez fort, mais aussi de certaines postures de gauche aussi au niveau politique, de représenter l'autre. L'autre étant toujours le non-blanc, en l'occurrence. Il y a un critique américain qui a très bien écrit là-dessus, me semble-t-il, c'est Grant Kester, sur un texte qui s'appelle Aesthetic Evangelist, où il explique comment se construit de façon totalement... problématique, éventuellement fallacieuse aussi, cette construction du bon blanc qui incarne et qui se valorise aussi en tant qu'évangéliste auprès des populations qui ont été démolies par toute la politique sous Reagan et George Bush senior dans les années 80. Alors ça j'ai entendu ça. Donc c'est une question, est-ce que c'est ça que j'ai bien entendu ? Cette problème qui était d'avoir représenté l'autre. Dans ce que j'ai entendu d'Armen, qui était est-ce qu'il n'y aurait pas eu un autre problème à gauche qui aurait été de stigmatiser des formes d'ignorants, de petits blancs, etc. D'un point de vue français, je me souviens de choses depuis même, disons-le, mythologie de Roland Barthes, que j'adore, hein, mais qui est en même temps cette critique de l'esprit petit bourgeois, du Spitzberger, comme disaient les Allemands auparavant, etc. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas quelque chose qui n'a pas été loupé en termes de critique ? Je le dis d'autant plus que venant de faubourg ouvrier et qu'ayant voulu, pour ma propre émancipation, m'émanciper des dimensions paternalistes, patriarcales, répétées, y compris dans la classe ouvrière, qui étaient étouffantes. J'ai voulu en sortir. Troisième point, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas, dans cette crispation actuelle aussi, des problématiques qu'on entend qui sont vraiment intéressantes du côté de l'intersectionnalité des luttes, qui seraient à penser aussi en termes d'intersectionnalité des luttes, féministes, queer, genre... trans, etc., mais aussi du côté ouvrier, blanc éventuellement. Il n'y a pas que des blancs, loin de là, la majorité des ouvriers ne sont plus blancs aujourd'hui, en tout cas des classes populaires. Est-ce qu'il n'y aurait pas une question qui devrait se poser aussi sur une intersectionnalité des luttes beaucoup plus étendue au-delà des problématiques qui ont nourri, et à juste titre, la gauche ces derniers temps, de faire valoir les minoritaires du côté des femmes, du côté des homosexuels, etc. Parce qu'on a eu le renversement pervers récemment, totalement pervers et orchestré, qui a été de dire que désormais les minoritaires étaient l'homme blanc, hétéro. Voilà. Je ne sais pas si je suis compris dans ma question, mais enfin il y a 3 questions, désolé. Elles sont un peu lourdes.
Well, I mean, I think you're bringing something up, which is identity politics, right? And together, and you're sandwich them with the idea of education. So I'm going to separate them to try to deal with them, and then I think that it was also addressed to you, so I take half of it and you can answer the other half.
Take 2/3.
One thing is that when it comes to the resentment, there is... to the dismissal that we have as a thinking left towards ignorance and the resentment that is being expressed towards education, a lot of this has to do with the something that I could call a forgetting of turning what we do into social service, and instead we keep it as private enlightenment. So when none of the information that we consume, or very little of it, is actually being used again or put to use into the world, but it only benefits our own edifices of thought, I can imagine that resentment is generated. Yeah, it's now that. So with that one, I can agree. In terms of identity politics, that's a little bit, how do you say, harder to to think that there is anything perverse about like trying to understand that the world is not divided in men, women, and blacks and whites. There are a lot of gray shades. So to again try to make this to narrow the definitions as a way to claiming power that has been taken away from these white male minorities, not the minorities, simply as equally represented as any of the other. And it's not about trying to see the world as a collection of minorities, but as a group of diversities. So so I cannot imagine that it has been a waste of time trying to claim rights and platforms for any of the identities that have managed to flourish in the in the current world landscape that we have today. You.
Well, it's your panel, but I think it's also a question of characters or so. I get angry. Maybe that's gendered. I don't know. Maybe I will get more
White
sad.
Man.
Could be. I have no interest in talking to these 18% assholes. It's not more of the people living in America who voted for Trump. There are many others. There's a working class that is actually working class that earns much less than the average Trump voter. It's just my anger talking. So it's not a political theorist answer after 3 months of research. So me currently, not that anyone wants to talk to me, but I don't want to encounter them. I'm much more interested in the 82% or in the 60% that didn't vote. That is for me personally the more interesting thing. And then, this otherness. Okay, well, 80% of my family are Armenians, immigrants in the US. So am I a white man? Am I European? I don't know. I have enough people like my people, other people, whatever, to talk to. So all this otherness construction, honestly, I don't care about this 18%. Dying of empire, the dreaming of an empire. So we do not have, the American situation is a specific one. It's not just a problem of neoliberalism, but it's the end of an empire, and apparently the Americans, foreseeable, will not live through the end of the empire as more or less peaceful as the English empire, there's a specific geopolitical economic situation that the Americans will have to accept, that they are on downhill.
But the thing is that this, it's very blatantly visible through the American elections, of course, but it's not a problem that it's only about the end of an empire. It's actually something that has been unleashed in a quite large way. I cannot separate this from the Brazilian coup d'etat. I cannot separate this from the situation in Turkey. I cannot separate this from the news in, I don't know, I think I was talking with somebody yesterday about this.
Hungary, Poland,
somebody torching the refugee camps in Greece yesterday. The fact that if male rapists of children agree to marry their underage victims, they can get out of jail in Turkey. It's all together. It's not that. And it's not that an empire is ending in the States and otherwise everybody's fine.
It was a bit like the way the conversation started. I agree. I just wanted to be angry for once because I was in a better mood before, but you rightly reminded me that we should be more have a more effective response maybe.
One more question.
Yeah.
En français, excusez-moi. Vous parliez plutôt vers la fin de la conversation de comment intervenir à travers des institutions, des plateformes, à travers l'art, j'imagine aussi, par rapport aux questions terribles qu'on a en ce moment. Mais connaissant un peu le monde de l'art, c'est un des endroits un endroit hyper antidémocratique que je connais. Ou même la question de la démocratie, on a l'impression que c'est bizarre de la poser, quoi. On a le droit de la poser si on est un artiste, on a le droit de la poser si on est une institution, mais si on la pose au monde de l'art, comme étant antidémocratique ou antidémocratique, cette question-là, elle semble ne pas venir à l'esprit des gens. Est-ce que le système économique de l'art est égalitaire et démocratique? C'est un endroit ultra-oligarchique, l'art. Et du coup, ma question, c'est est-ce que ça sert même à quelque chose d'imaginer intervenir à partir d'une situation qui est tellement pourrie? Et est-ce que ce ne serait pas plus intéressant, peut-être, de modestement recommencer par l'endroit où on est, l'art, et de repenser, même peut-être très basiquement, des structures plus égalitaires, plus démocratiques dans l'art? Parce que, de mon expérience, et si on regarde honnêtement les institutions, et je parle de simplement à Paris, cette idée de la démocratie, elle est juste absente et elle n'existe pas à travers la manière dont c'est financé, dont c'est organisé. Du coup, voilà ma question, c'est est-ce que ce ne serait pas intéressant aussi de partir de ce point de vue-là?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a funny thing. 2 weeks ago, which feels like a century ago, I was in a conversation precisely about that. Is political art useful in the current climate? And my answer in that, I mean, I'm incredibly disenchanted with political art which takes place only as gestures that get circulated within certain institutions and present a very conventional representation of politics as they are supposed to look, which is outdated and is nostalgic and is highly imaginary. Like especially, you know, like and thinking that in operating within institutions which, as you say, are incredibly. I mean, I don't know if undemocratic is even the right word. They are pretty rotten. Yeah, how can I pretend that political art is going to make any sense when I have to fight somebody to get paid for 2 months, or when I am told that I cannot come because there is no that I cannot go somewhere because there is no place for my child to stay, or I don't know, how can I think about fixing the world where there is, you know, like when I'm part of a conversation that is, I don't know how many of you have been there, I'm sure so many, that is like, oh my God, we have this exhibition, oh man, we need a woman immediately. You don't know how many times I have been that token woman, yes? So of course, it's highly unrealistic to expect, and that's why I was like trying to say before that I always try to measure from which position do I act or try to make a dent on things, because I never think that through my art will I change anything, yeah? Like I think that through my art I can index the moment, I can make certain representations, I can you know, keep the pulse of a certain situation on the hopes that it can be read later, but I do not think that the change comes from that. I think if we want to change something through art, first we clean our house and then we clean the rest. Of course, in that sense, you're completely right.
Thanks a lot, Julieta. Thanks for the questions. We will have no break now, but we will applaud, nevertheless.